This is chapter 9.3, Simplifying Rational Expressions. You learned this skill in Algebra 1, but it came to my attention that a lot of you were struggling with it, so we're going to go ahead and review it. Okay, what we're going to do is first of all determine what a rational expression is. It's basically a fraction whose numerator and denominator are non-zero polynomials. So I always tell kids they're fractions with attitudes. You got a numerator, you've got a denominator. You simplify them just like you would a fraction or a ratio. And so let's go ahead and look at how we might go about that. So if you would now turn to page 480 in your textbook, it's helpful, I think, for you to look there. This is example 1. We've got A, B, C, and then I'd made an extra example for you. So you have 15x over 5. When you simplify that, I like to stretch it out. 15 times x over 5. You won't always have to do this. 15 and 5 have a common denominator of 5, meaning 5 will divide into both of them. 5 divides into 15 3 times. 5 divides into 5 once. So it's 3 times x, which is 3x, over 1. You don't have to put it over 1. If you did, I wouldn't mark it wrong, but your answer will be 3x. Okay, moving on to x plus 5 over x. Now this one always creates a little problem because kids think it will, or students think it will simplify to 5. That is not correct. X plus 5 is an expression. So unless your denominator is x plus 5, this problem cannot be simplified any further. So all you would write is already in simplest form. So just because they give it to you doesn't mean it necessarily can be simplified. Now let's take a look at letter C. So we've got 6x. I like to again stretch it out, 6 times x. And then over 14 times, now you can stretch out x squared as much as you want. So x times x if you need to. If you don't need to, that's fine too. 16 and 14 share a common factor of 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 14 divided by 2 is 7. You have x and x, that's going to be 1 and 1. So 3 times 1 is 3. 7 times 1 times x is 7x. So the most simplified form of 6x over 14x squared is 3 over 7x. Now we're going to go to the last problem, which is an extra. And it's 4x squared, so I'm going to stretch it out, 4 times x times x. Now, not everybody needs to stretch out the variables that much, so you decide what you need to do. Then we have 2x, so 2 times x plus 3. I'm going to leave it in parentheses, but you don't have to. So 2 and 4 share a common factor of 2, so 4 divided by 2 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. These x's share a common factor, and so they cancel to 1. That's how some of you think of it. So you have 2 times 1 times x in the numerator, which is 2x. In the denominator, you have 1 times x plus 3. I'm going to take it out of the parentheses and put x plus 3. You don't have to take it out of the parentheses, but you would not see it in a multiple choice response in the parentheses. All right, now using what you learned in A, B, C, and in the extra problem, I'd like you to try the checkpoint activities on page 480. I'd like you to try to simplify those. And then I'd like you to turn the recording on once you've done that and check your answers and listen to the explanation. If you're uncertain as to why you got something wrong, go back and listen to the explanation again. For 4x over 10, I stretched it out to 4 times x over 10. 4 and 10 share the common factor of 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Your numerator is now 2 times x, which is 2x over 5. Number 2, 8 over 4x, very similar to number 1. I stretched out 4x to 4 times x. 8 and 4 share a common factor of 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So you have 2 in the numerator, 1 times x is x, so 2 over x is the solution. Number 3, we've got 9x over 12 times x plus 1 in parentheses. So I stretched out 9 and x to 9 times x. I stretched out 12 and put a times sign, then x plus 1 in parentheses. 9 and 12 share a common factor of 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. You cannot simplify this x with this x plus 1. X plus 1 is an expression. It cannot be simplified with x. So you have 3 times x, which is 3x, 4 times, in parentheses, x plus 1. The last one, number 4, is 1 minus x over x. Again, 1 minus x is an expression. It cannot be simplified with this x, so it is already in simplest form. Okay, we're going to go on to some more complex ones on the next page. All right, I'd like you to turn now in your books to page 43. They don't do any more of these types of problems in the examples per se. They embed them in multiplication, but I want to do them separately before we start multiplication. So we have 5x over 25x cubed minus 35. Now, the first thing you do is you stretch this out as 5 times x. Now, here's where it becomes a little more involved. Back in chapter 5, we did factoring, and that's what we're going to do. Factoring is the opposite or inverse of the distributive property. So you look at 25 and you look at 35. They both have a common factor of 5, so we factor it out. There's no x's in 35, so you can't factor anything else. You say 5 times what is 25x cubed? Well, that's 5x cubed. 5 times what is negative 35? That's minus 7. Now, we look at this, we can see the 5's are a common factor. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So we're left with 1 times x, which is x, over, we don't need the parentheses anymore, because 1 times 5x cubed minus 7 is just that, 5x cubed minus 7. So that is the simplification for number 33, or number 29, excuse me. Okay, we're going to go on now to number 32. Let's circle this. Looking at number 32, we've got 3x cubed plus 7x squared. Well, we can see 3 and 7 don't have a common factor. So I'm going to factor out my biggest x, which is x squared. If you want to stretch it out, you can. Some people do, some people don't want to. So x squared is x times x. So we have 3x squared times what is 3x cubed? Well, that's 3x. So x squared times another x is x to the third. X squared times what is 7x squared? Well, that is going to be plus 7. Now we look down at this one. 6 and 9 have a common factor of 3, so I factor out a 3. We've got x to the fifth, x to the third. The biggest factor is x to the third. So we say 3x to the third times what gives me 6x to the fifth? Well, 3 times what is 6? 2. X to the third times what is x to the fifth? Oh, x squared. Plus, then you say 3 times what is 9? 3. X third times what is x third? Oh, that's 1, so I just put in the 3. Now, I've got x to the second, x to the third. That means I'm left with just an x. This is 1, and I'm left with x in the denominator. So I have 1 times 3x plus 7, so I'm left with 3x plus 7. I no longer need the parentheses. Then I have 3x, 3 times x is 3x, times 2x squared plus 3. I'm not quite done yet because I need to multiply this back out using the distributive property, since I can't simplify any further. So I end up with 3x plus 7 over 3x times 2x squared is going to be 6x to the third. And then 3x times 3 is going to be 9x. And so the simplified answer for number 32 is 3x plus 7 over 6x cubed plus 9x. All right, let's have you shut up. Go ahead and write down on the right side of your paper numbers 31 and 33. Go ahead and stop the recording. And when you finish, turn it back on and check it. If you don't understand the explanation, listen to it a second time. Okay, on number 31, we can factor out from 14 and 21 a 7, and from x squared and x we can factor out an x. So 7x. So 7x times what gives you 14x squared? Well, that's 2x. 7x times what gives you 21x? That's plus 3. And then I just stretched out 42 times x to the fourth. Well, 7 and 42 have a common factor of 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 42 divided by 7 is 6. We have an x in the numerator and an x to the fourth in the denominator. We're left with x cubed in the denominator and 1 in the numerator. 1 times 2x plus 3 is just 2x plus 3. We can take it out of the parentheses for the numerator. 6 times x cubed is just 6x cubed for the denominator. So 2x plus 3 over 6x cubed is the simplification of problem number 31. For number 33, we have 4x to the 6th plus 24x cubed over 12x squared minus 30x to the 4th. Looking at 4 and 24, we can factor out a 4. We have x to the 6th and x to the 3rd. We can factor out an x to the 3rd power. So 4x to the 3rd times what gives us 4x to the 6th? Well, that's x to the 3rd. And 4x to the 3rd times what gives us 24x cubed? Well, that's 6. For the denominator, we factor out 12 and 30. We factored out a 6. For x squared and x to the 4th, we factored out an x squared. So we say 6x squared times what gives us 12x squared? Well, that's 2. 6x squared times what gives us 30x to the 4th? Well, 6 times negative 5 gives us negative 30. X squared times another x squared gives us x to the 4th. You can see that we can simplify. The 4 and the 6 are divisible both by 2, so 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. We have an x to the 3rd in the numerator and an x to the 2nd in the denominator. So x to the 2nd becomes 1. You factored out 2 x's, and then x to the 3rd, you're left with 1x. So we have 2x times x to the 3rd plus 6. And then we have 3 times 1, which is 3, times 2 minus 5x squared. Now to finish this, we need to go back the reverse direction and use the distributive property. So 2x times x to the 3rd is going to be 2x to the 4th. 2x times 6 is going to be 12x. In the denominator, 3 times 2 is 6, and then 3 times 5x squared is minus 15x squared. So the simplified answer for number 33 is 2x to the 4th plus 12x over 6 minus 15x squared. We're moving on to the last simplification, again, a little, slightly more complicated. Okay, for number 35, you have a trinomial divided by a binomial. So many trinomials, not all, but many can be factored, and this one is one of those. So we have x squared plus 9x plus 18. So it's a quadratic trinomial, and it's going to be guess and check, so it's plus plus, and x squared is x times x. Factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. Well, 3 and 6 are the only ones that will give us 9, so we're going to use 3 times 6. And if we check it with FOIL, x times x, x squared. Outside is 6x times 6, 6x. Inside 3 times x, which is 3x. 6x and 3x is 9x, so these check off. And then 3 times 6 on the last term is 18, so everything works. It's all over. Now we need to look at 4x and 24, and notice that 4 is a common factor for both. So 4 times what gives you 4x? Well, that's x. 4 times what gives you 24? Well, that's going to be 6. So now we look at simplification. We can see we have an x plus 6 in the numerator and x plus 6 in the denominator. So those become 1. And you're left with x plus 3, we don't need the parentheses anymore, over 4. If you leave the parentheses, it is not incorrect. It's just x plus 3 over 4 is what you'd see in a multiple choice test. Please go ahead and do number 36. Shut the recording off, do 36, and then turn it back on to check your work. Okay, x squared plus 6x minus 16 is a quadratic trinomial. So we're going to use the pattern plus minus because the subtraction between the middle and last term. So factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 3, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Well, a positive 8 and a negative 2 will give us the 6x here. So it's x plus 8 times x minus 2. You could check this in the table or using FOIL. And then for the denominator, same idea, x plus 12 times x minus 2. And you can see that the x minus 2's will cancel and become 1, so you're left with x plus 8 over x plus 12. Again, you can check that these factorings are correct, but we did that back in Chapter 5. And again, this is guess and check because this is not got a leading coefficient, it's 1.